body knows how to do it.
It's a girl.
As we speak, every second, a woman gives birth somewhere in the world. It may sound ordinary, but for the woman living it, birth is nothing like that.
Welcome to Born to be Wild, the podcast. We call in guests from Portugal and beyond to share real birth stories and lived experiences, and to explore what maternity care really feels like on the ground.
In this podcast, we invite you to listen, question, and sometimes unlearn what pregnancy, birth, and postpartum are supposed to look like.
For us, wild means staying connected to yourself, your body, and your choices, even when systems make that difficult.
So let's begin.
We were out of the norm. We're not just doing a home birth, but we were also being a doctor and doing a home birth. As you said, I didn't feel comfortable sharing this with colleagues at work. So I decided not to share any details.
Maria and Carlos are one of those couples that make people believe in love. The kind of couple whose story seems to unfold so naturally. Both Portuguese, they met in Lisbon before moving to London, where Maria was pursuing her studies to become a general practitioner, and Carlos was studying business. Over the years, their relationship grew until they eventually married in the Portuguese countryside.
Yeah, it's a very inspiring story. And from the very beginning of their relationship, they knew they wanted children. It was never really a question for them, but rather like a shared certainty. They spent a lot of time talking about it, making sure they felt aligned in what becoming parents meant for both of them. Marie is a doctor, which makes the choice they made for the birth of their child interesting. Because together they decided to prepare for a home birth in Portugal, supported by midwives, and they were especially aiming for a non-medicalized experience.
That's super interesting. So in this episode, Maria and Carlos share the journey that led them to that decision, how they prepared for it as a couple, and how deeply Carlos supported Maria throughout the process.
Yeah, because he did, and that's an interesting story in itself. And with many birth stories, things didn't unfold exactly as planned. At one point, they even found themselves having to push against the system to try to access the birth they had imagined.
So today, we are very happy to share with you that story. Let's dive in.
So, hi, Maria and Carlos. So good to see you here today, and thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Hi, Ren. Great being here. Thank you so much.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having us.
So, tell us a little bit more about yourself, guys.
My name is Maria. I'm 34. I'm a doctor. I'm a family medicine, but I'm specializing now in women's health.
I'm Carlos, Maria's partner. We've been together for 12 years now. We had Matthias, our baby boy, about a year ago. And it's been a journey, not just this last year. It really has been a journey since pre-birth, during birth, and post-birth, right?
And so you got married a few years ago, and you got pregnant, what, a year later?
Yeah, exactly. So got married, and actually we did like a registry, like it was a small wedding in London in June, and then we did the proper party with a ceremony here in Portugal. That was in September 23.
Mhm.
And then we went traveling for 6 months around the world, and that's when we started thinking of Matthias and of his arrival and how we could prepare ourselves for his coming and to be a home for this beautiful baby.
And how did you prepare for the pregnancy?
That's a good question because we gave a lot of thought to this. We had been reading a lot about conscious parenting and conscious conception as well, and how can we prepare our body and minds for this moment, and also spiritually. And I read a bit about spirit babies as well, and it was during that time that whilst we were traveling, we took time to do some retreats. We did some panchakarma. It's a Ayurvedic retreats, and we mentioned specifically that we were thinking of conceiving. So it was more tailored to that. And then I think the most important things you can't really prepare and plan, but it's just talking about that and about our reality and, how it would be like. And then also just dreaming together and, talking about, our future lives. And
Think on an initial phase, pre-conception, when we were thinking about the environments and our situation in life that we would like to be in, right? We always thought that we wanted to be in a space where we would create the environments naturally, right? To for things
Mhm.
to happen. We were fortunate that in our case it didn't take a while, right? But sometimes it can take.
Yeah, it can take easily up until a year. But that was not the case with you guys, I understand.
we
Yes,
felt
we
ready.
felt ready. I think in the travels, we were thinking that now would be a good time to think about it. Once we come back to our daily routines, I think we wanted this change, the change as well in our lifestyle and environment, and just how we used to live, right? So, I think mentally we were getting ourselves more conscious and more prepared for that, and I think everything else then naturally just followed in terms of thinking about the home birth itself, right? Whether if we wanted to do it at home or at a
Yeah.
hospital, at least as plan A, right? Uh,
Also because it was never part of the plan to have ever a baby in Portugal. This was really something that we never envisioned for ourselves. So we thought
No?
we'd
Why
be
not?
we lived in London for a really long time, and I knew the system inside out there. I also had I worked for 6 months in obstetrics and
Mhm.
gynecology in London, part of my GP training. We also always thought, we'll be having our baby here, and we never, I don't know, for some reason we never questioned it because we thought we'd be living there. You can choose if you want to have the baby at home, if you want to have in a birth center, if you want to have it in a hospital.
there are options.
There are
There
exactly.
are many options, and each option is respectful, I guess,
Mhm.
in a certain way.
We know that the system doesn't make it necessarily easy, and so there is a lot of medicalization if you decide to do a hospital birth. So, was it part of the decision to go for home birth?
Yes, the decision was to do a home birth in Portugal because of the lack of options that the system allows.
Mm.
If Portugal maybe had a system that is, I guess, closer to what we see maybe in the UK, I guess even in Holland, for example, right? Then we would maybe opt for going into a birth center, for example. That would
Yeah,
also provide the
exactly.
environment and the conditions, right? That we envisioned and that we
So, just
planned.
for the people that don't know, a birth center is this a physical space that is run by midwives, and then is very close or inside the hospital, but with full autonomy of the midwives, and where you usually go when you are low risk pregnancy.
And if the transfer to a hospital is needed, most of the time you only have to go through one door and then you're at the hospital.
Yeah, at my hospital, it was just a different floor, and I remember loving as a doctor being there because I thought it was so calm and, all the like fairy lights, and I just love the feeling of being there.
Sounds
So
like heaven,
sometimes I
yeah.
would just go in there and sit a little bit to like have a bit of quiet.
Yeah. Hey, but you as a doctor, Maria, you also had a strong feeling, "Oh, maybe I don't wanna give birth in a hospital." Tell us about
Yeah.
that.
That's it's super complex, I think, in many ways, because on the one hand, I am a doctor, and then I think it's great for myself, and for it was great being pregnant and being informed, and having that knowledge to make informed decisions. Sometimes I think it went against me in that sense as well, of knowing the protocols and how things
Yeah.
work at the hospital, how much it's medicalized, how much you're part of this system. I think a bit everywhere, but I think definitely in England there was a lot of defensive medicine. I think there's a lot of fear mongering. I know that I was part of that system. I was trained in that way.
Yeah. But also aware of the system,
Very
right?
aware, yeah, very aware, but it doesn't It also kind of like gives you, yeah, I mean, we can talk about this a bit more, but
Hours.
exactly, I could go on for hours, but I wonder how much also that affected me as a person and how how my birth kind of progressed and how much, what was the impact of that in my personal experience, being a doctor and having being trained in that system, how that then impacted my personal journey as a laboring mother.
Yeah.
And I remember clearly, Maria, when we met, you mentioned that your colleagues were not aware of your choice of home birth.
No.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Um, this was in England still. We always had this dream of having a home birth, I think. And even in England, being such a normal part of the system, I remember one of the doctors saying, "Oh no, don't ever have a birth at home."
Oh,
I know he's coming from. I know, I've been on the other side, and I don't blame
yeah.
doctors for this, particularly in England, where they only see the bad outcomes. They only see the
Yeah.
high risk. All the low risk pregnancies and labors, the doctors don't get to see unless there's a complication or something. That's usually, it's a very small percentage.
But they see it as the reality of giving birth is that
Exactly,
it's
exactly,
complicated. Yeah.
exactly. So they just see that. And actually, I think the midwife knows how to look at the woman. She knows how, just by looking and listening to the sound, she knows
Yeah.
what stage of labor she's in.
Yeah.
A doctor
Exactly.
wouldn't know that because they're not
No.
and it's okay. I mean, what their training is exactly for to treat the complication. That's why they
Yeah.
became obstetricians,
Exactly.
and yeah, and I'm super also grateful for your medicine and for the lives they saved. Yeah, but I think there's so much more that we have to do to kind of give this more autonomy for the woman to believe in herself and in her body, and
Yeah.
have the confidence to birth freely and without fear.
Yeah. Let's dive into that a bit later because a short recap, we talked about your relationship, how you met, and
Hmm.
also about that you really prepared yourselves for conception and you got pregnant like within a short amount of time. So that's great. How would you summarize your pregnancy?
I loved it. I love being pregnant. The and
It was definitely um, a mix of emotions for me. Initially, was great to know that we were going to jump into this journey, but with every journey, there's going to be ups and downs, and I feel that from my side, it took some time for me to realize. I guess longer than it did definitely for Maria. There was also mood swings and like challenges along the way that for me was also hard to adapt sometimes. Although I loved the journey and I loved the news and the kind of thinking about it, birth and planning for birth and doing all
Yeah.
the
You don't hear that so often from a man. So that's quite interesting. What did you love about it?
he
Now,
was
I
very
like to be
involved in.
That's
involved.
good.
Maybe sometimes not as much as I should, or maybe not as much as I would like to, but usually I try to. And also for me, it was a journey of learning, right? Because, like, I guess most of society, that's not the patterns or that those are not the norms, right? That we
Yeah,
follow, right? So
exactly.
going into a whole journey of planning birth at home and doing birth sessions, I guess like group sessions with other couples that are going through this journey as well, and having a midwife outside of the system working with us on a monthly basis. All this is a new process. So the pregnancy was great, the process was great, but like everything, there's going to be always ups and downs, and you're always going to be unsure about certain decisions that you make because what happens is that the external influences, right, or the external opinions of people that have very strong opinions about topics, specifically
Yeah.
about w- whether we like it or not, always have some sort of influence in our
Mhm.
mind, right, and how we perceive and look at stuff.
Yeah.
It might take a bit of courage
Right.
as well.
Yep,
Yeah,
especially within the society that we're in here in Portugal specifically. Right?
we were out of the norm. not just doing a home birth, but we were also being a doctor and doing a home birth, as you said. I didn't feel comfortable sharing this with colleagues at work, so I decided not to share. I didn't want to lie as well, so I just didn't share any detail. I wasn't 100% sure, and we weren't 100% sure about anything about home birth, or but we didn't know what the other option was.
What I remember was I asked Maria specifically, right? So if we want to do a home birth in Portugal, where do we start? What do we
Mhm.
need to do, right? And the first thing I realized is that in order to actually have a birth at home, you need to have a allocated midwife that can
Yeah.
actually help you throughout the process, right? So I asked, who are these midwives, right? Like, is there a list of midwives that we can
Where do you find them?
that we can
Yeah.
reach out and so apparently Maria got
Um,
access to a document that compiled all the accredited midwives that can actually do home births in Portugal.
Or independent midwives.
Yeah.
Independent
Quite
midwives.
short
It
list.
was about like 12, maybe
No,
15.
maybe,
I
yeah,
don't
maybe
remember, but
Yeah.
20. Yeah, but
About a
it's not
handful. Yeah.
not many. Yeah.
yeah, very, very few. So we decided to reach out to a couple or maybe a few more and literally just set up some interviews and some time to get to know them, just see how we felt about each
Mhm.
one, and then make a decision on who would be the one that would follow us. And we realized that midwives always work with someone else, so it's always a team of two minimum. So we knew that we will have a team of two kind of on the day at least. And also that midwife would also help us throughout the process until the due date, right? What I mean with the process is more around sessions and kind of helping us understand more around the physiology and the timings and the whole process of how birth
Yeah,
works,
preparation and the prep.
preparation and the prep, which we'll touch on. So that's kind of how it all started.
And because it's just such a small hand of midwives available, there is a really an issue of availability. So was that an issue for you, or you were lucky from the beginning?
I think because we looked very early on, probably after the first
I think
scan,
when
maybe after the 12-week scan, we contacted a few, and so they were quite available. So that's what I would probably suggest is as soon as even, once you have the first trimester scan, contacting the midwives.
and we had time, right? So there was no rush. We ended up choosing one of the midwives. She worked at a center at least once a week, which was really close to our house. She did like group sessions with other couples that were on this journey as well, which were great. At the end of the day, these sessions really helped us understand the experience,
And
right?
that's very nice, yeah, to be as a group and to be able also to live that experience with other parents.
Yeah. Exactly.
Exactly.
You don't really have other people to talk to about this.
Like Maria was saying, because we're on this journey in a way out of the norm, if you don't relate to people doing this like you, then it's really hard.
It's a very lonely journey if you don't have other people
So
to
knowing
share that.
and hearing and learning from others that are also going through this is great, but it's not just learning from them because they're also learning. They're also going through this process.
Yeah.
It's learning from
Exactly.
people that done the process. So they would invite couples that had already had home births to share their experience with us
Mhm.
so that we can ask questions and kind of clarify any doubts we have with our own journey. So that also opened up just the perception of things, having exposure.
And so we decided to find an obstetrician who we could share this with. This was really important for me particularly, that I could, open freely and, about our plan. And it was great because we would see her, and it was very also, being a colleague, it was very formal as well. And
Yeah, that's also really a big difference in Portugal if you compare to other countries like the UK or Netherlands or France. There, the midwives have full autonomy. So if you're low risk pregnancy, you will only see midwives during
exactly.
pregnancy. But here, you still do need to have a doctor to do certain prescriptions, and there's a big lack of autonomy for the midwives.
So, okay. Midwife check, preparation check, and then your due date came closer. Did the doctors already start asking questions about you when you wanted the baby to be born?
not just the doctors, it's
Yeah.
everyone. And
Yeah.
everyone keeps asking you and, calling you, oh, and what's happening? Why isn't this, going to this and that? And then time passes by and suddenly you're getting to 41 weeks and you, of course, as much informed as even as a doctor and reading the evidence and knowing about the guidelines and even working in the UK where this was practiced, a part of me was doubting myself and we were talking about that and we never thought because also my sister and my mother and everyone in my family had birthed by then, and so I thought I would as well. That was my expectation, and then suddenly all these days are passing and nothing's happening. Of course you
Yeah.
start getting a bit nervous. I think it's normal. And I remember very well one a really good friend of mine, she lived in Australia, and she also she planned for a home birth there, and she said that she gave me a lot of strength at the time. She said, look, this is just a societal perception, because if you were living in Australia, no one would be asking you this until you're 42 weeks. Actually, people
Exactly.
take that
So
date
the due
as
date is the 42 weeks there.
Yeah.
So before then, no one would ask anything
yeah.
about
No.
pregnancy or
And she said
babies.
no one would ask me until I was 42 weeks. No one would ever ask me
Yeah.
anything.
Especially the first baby is usually the baby that takes more
Yeah,
time
the
because
longest.
your body, it's your first time as well, so it needs more time to get the labor started. But
Exactly.
so tell us about maybe the start of the labor. How
Yeah.
was it?
When
Like,
did it start and how did it start?
yes,
It was Dia dos Reis, King's Day, which is very important because so Carlos is half Spanish. So my mother-in-law, she's from Barcelona, and so we were celebrating it at her place. But every day, I remember every day we used to say like, "Oh, it's gonna be tonight. It's gonna be
Well, I think it's important to mention that the due date was for the 28th of December, right?
So
Okay.
very close to Christmas
So
as
very
well.
close to Christmas. So before Christmas, we were like, oh, maybe it's going to be born during Christmas time.
Yeah,
And then after
Yeah.
Christmas, it's like, oh, is it going to be born
New
during New
Year's.
New
Year's?
Year's.
Yes, yeah.
It's
And
gonna
and
be the first baby of the year.
yeah, and then suddenly it's the 6th of January, and we're like, okay, when is it going to happen? So I think the contraction started that
That night,
evening.
so
Yeah.
that evening, it were started as mild contractions, kind of like more like a period pain.
So you were 42 at that
No, at the time I was
41 and
41
like
plus,
4 or 5, right?
3.
yeah,
5.
maybe 3 days,
yes.
yeah, something like that. And that's when, I started to have some mild contractions, and we went home very, excited. Oh, it's gonna be tonight, tomorrow we'll have our baby, and yeah, and that was it. We came back home, and yeah, the contractions intensified, and it was the whole night like that, very intense contractions. They started getting more frequent, and yeah, we spent the whole night here, just the two of us. They never got very regular, so we never called anyone.
You just stayed home and you didn't do anything? Or you went to see a series or some make an apple pie? I hear that a lot to distract themselves.
I was beyond the 40 weeks.
Yeah.
We had already kind of prepared the home,
We also
and
had
so
all our birth values during the planning phase. We had different exercises around what environment we want to have, what were the values of our birth, what we wanted to
And
connect,
that's really
Yeah.
nice.
how we wanted to
Super
connect,
cool.
how we wanted the mood of the house in a way.
and the
So
feelings
the
that we want, even despite the place that we would birth Matthias, if it was at home or at the hospital, what were actually the feelings that we wanted to bring to that moment. And so we had those, which we can tell it was connection, love, serenity, trust, and surrender.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and so we had those written down in cards as well, and so we had all
spread
that
around the
spread
house
around the
and
house.
with different messages. Then Maria did a mother's blessing with the ladies of the family and friends here at our place. And everybody wrote messages for
Mhm.
Maria.
Oh,
We stick them up the wall. So
It
we
was so
had
nice.
we had the house prepared for I guess at least a week prior date. So
But it was
um,
nice also to have that, the messages, you're reading them every day and they're just, even if you're not reading them, you're seeing them. So they start, going into your like subconscious mind and you're kind of like assimilating all those messages, right?
You were both very well prepared for that.
Very well. Yeah.
As much as you can be, I don't think.
So your labor progressed, you were super well prepared, and then things started getting serious. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I mean, everything started intensifying. The contractions got more frequent. This happened night after night.
It's like it was not that only the night after Dia dos Reis, but it was nights after night after night.
yeah, we thought it was going to
Yeah.
happen next day, but
Wow.
actually well, labor took 4 days.
Well,
Wow.
it was 5 nights at home.
We were having our midwife popping
Yeah?
in and out regularly.
Yeah.
She did that for 3 days. So
Every
Wow.
day she would
she
come
would
in.
pop in. She would look at how the state of Maria. Maria was obviously in pain, as you can imagine. I was just trying to support her, doing some exercises to kind of pressing her hips together, just trying to be there. Obviously, it was full of emotions, very
Yeah.
overwhelming. Lots happening. Pain was hard to deal with, obviously for Maria, but also for me seeing Maria like that. It was like 3 days of just uncertainty.
But did you sleep or what did you do during those 3 days?
The thing was that it would kind of like calm down a bit more during the day, but I was still having frequent contractions to the point that where I just couldn't sleep at all during the
Okay,
day. And
wow.
at night they were very, very intense. They would get very frequent, every 1 to 2 minutes apart, but they never got super regular. And that's why we never called the midwife, because we thought, okay, this is
And so
not
at that
getting right.
stage, you were not opening, and the water hadn't broken yet.
Waters
No,
didn't break until like until until
until the last
until
minutes.
the
Yeah.
last.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, well let's get to that later. But okay, so I can imagine laboring for days made you super tired.
I was exhausted, to be honest, both of us. But by at one point, I was just, I was so exhausted from not sleeping that I remember falling asleep very deeply. I would go into a deep state of sleep in between contractions, and this would be for just a few minutes, just 2, 3 minutes of like a deep sleep. So when I would wake up for the contractions, um, it was like I was in this like dream state. So I was already. Sometimes I think that maybe there was some. I don't know if it was hallucinations. I think maybe it was like just I was in a dream, and then I would have to quickly wake up with a really intense contraction. And a lot of it, I mean, Carlos was there a lot of the time, but at one point he was so exhausted as well that it was hard for him. I had to wake up because I had the contractions, right? I think it
Yeah.
was the only thing that would make me wake up because we were so exhausted. At one point, I wouldn't leave the shower, and then the last night, which was the fifth night, I was there for like 12 hours inside the actual bath.
So that's a really intense start of labor. And so when you guys decided that maybe it was time to go to plan B,
So we only started considering that wouldn't be possible early morning after the fifth night. I can't remember clearly, but the other day I had this conversation with my dear friend Alma, who was also the doula. She was our backup doula, but ended up being our doula. And the idea was brought to me by her that the hospital was always an option. And I think by then, I hadn't really put this in, it wasn't an option for me until she mentioned it. And that's when I kind of like, I felt a relief when she said this. I
Wow.
remember when she then got the midwife and she talked to me about that option, and she said, of course, it was always an option. I think Alma was the first to actually kind of like, she sensed that I was kind of reaching my limits. And looking back, it was really important to me that someone did, because I think it was hard for me to recognize my own limits at the time. It was also because I was trying for something that was my dream, right? In
Yeah.
the first journey, you don't know what's normal, what's You think that suffering equals progress. You don't know what's and you don't know your own endurance, so it's really hard to
It's true.
measure it.
But and from my perspective, my role was to do my best to keep aligned and connected on plan A, right? So we never really discussed ever around when should I um, give in to make the decision for plan B.
It's actually great because there are also midwives that were telling us that the number one reason for hospital transfer is because the partner is freaking out. Suddenly he feels like, it's better to go to the hospital. But I think it's super nice that in your case it was how can I go as further and really as possible just to maintain plan A.
I remember saying to Carlos, when I'm just about to quit, don't let me. And I think it was a relief when I put that option on the table, and
Yeah.
that's how I knew. And when I made the decision, I remember crying a lot. But then recently, when talking to my friend Alma, she was telling me, I can't remember this, but she said that when I was crying, I started talking to Matthias, and I apologized and I explained how tired I was and that I wouldn't be able to do it at home as planned. We would go, to the hospital, and then, when I made that decision, we
We
had everything
we
packed.
had everything packed, everything ready. Super calmly, we
Yeah.
got into the car.
Yeah.
We drove to the hospital. Everything was super relaxed.
I asked her to examine me, and that's when
The
I actually
midwife.
made the decision, when I realized that because the problem with Matthias was that, and she said she's never seen this. She said that usually first pregnancies, they tend to engage weeks before labor starts. I started labor and he wasn't engaged yet. So
So it was
Yeah.
4 days of just 4 centimeters dilation, right?
yeah,
And him
Yeah.
not fully engaged. So we got to the hospital and he wasn't fully engaged yet. The car ride was a little bit of a,
bumpy.
a
Yeah?
little bit of a
Why?
ride, quite struggling for
I mean,
Maria.
it's not massive in the back seat. So I was there with the midwife and, trying to like find my position during contractions.
One funny thing was that, and I think it comes down to what, because Maria's a doctor, when we got to the hospital, that's when I became really nervous and anxious about what's next because it was outside of the initial plan. It was outside of the environment that I was familiar with.
Hmm.
However, for Maria, although it was, yes, outside of the plan and outside of what we wanted and all that in that perspective, Maria was really comfortable in that environment because that's
Yeah.
Because
her
you know
environment.
it, yeah.
She was super relaxed,
Yeah.
I was
right?
very relaxed. I mean, I
And
was very
in
also present.
control in
I
that
was
in
in
present, yes.
I was present with the contractions as well.
You got into the hospital and then you got welcomed by a midwife or a doctor you've been seen.
But,
And then what happens
So
after?
we
we
saw
saw
a midwife, and our
Yeah.
midwife handed the case over. I got a CTG, and then I went straight to see. Well, first I went straight to see the doctor, and
Yeah.
actually she asked for my birth plan. So
that
this
was,
was
which is great to see. At
Wow,
least
that's good.
That's
they were
very
they were the ones asking for it. This was Hospital de Cascais.
Yeah.
Um, but to be honest, I feel like she asked because she's probably just used to having that because she kind of just then skimmed. She didn't really read it fully.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, okay. And then she just said,
the
okay, here we
non-negotiables.
have three non-negotiables.
Yeah,
Yeah,
3
and
non-negotiables. That's the only things
Okay.
we don't allow not to happen.
what were there?
they were IV access, so intravenous access,
Yeah.
CTG, which we were able to negotiate
A
a
portable one or
portable one,
Portal, yeah.
wireless. And then the third one, which was the one that we didn't agree with, was postpartum, like as soon as the baby was born, to have oxytocin to prevent
For the placenta.
hemorrhage.
It's very common here in Portugal, yeah. And you were able to negotiate on this one?
No,
Okay.
those were the only things that
they
they
didn't.
didn't really give any chance. However, everything else, in a way, they did respect. We were able to also have a room with low lights. We were able to actually put music during birth. The whole
Very
process
nice.
was smooth in that sense, right?
I remember being quite not shocked, but she wasn't very empathic and she wasn't, and the whole team of doctors. But on the other hand, I think the midwives were really nice. The
Okay.
whole right. So every
The
midwife
midwives make the
we
difference. I feel that we trusted more the midwives than the actual
Well, I
medical
can
team.
imagine because it's their specialty,
Yeah.
guiding people by giving
And also
birth.
you've
So,
been
yeah.
prepared with midwives all along, so you felt very confident in that setup. At that stage, Maria, did you ask for any pain reliefs after 4 days of struggling?
So that was one of the main
five
reasons.
5 nights.
One of the main reasons. Yeah.
That's yeah, yeah. By then I wanted an epidural to be able to sleep a little bit, but I had a lot of problems with the epidural. Came in, they did one, it didn't work. They have they had to take it out. They had to call someone else and do a different.
Procedure.
And yeah, and then throughout the nights, I had problems with the epidural. Yeah, but yeah,
But your labor at that moment, it was progressing or it was stable?
yeah, it wasn't progressing, and that's when the doctors came. As soon as we got admitted, the whole team of doctors came, and they said that they wanted to start oxytocin to help the labor progress.
It was my first experience of how the system hurries you, of the
Uh,
protocols that I guess each hospital might have. So it's interesting because we spent 5 days waiting for things to naturally progress.
Yeah.
Then we got there, and then suddenly they wanted to progress things artificially with no specific reason why. It's because they said, well, because we have to. And I said, but why do we have to if we're okay in waiting and if the baby is fine? And there's no reason why. So that was a little bit of a shock. So we had to somehow negotiate their
Yeah.
way that they wanted to push for this to be artificial.
How did you negotiate? Did you just calmly tell them, or was it more with a raised voice, or what can I?
I think because I was a doctor, unfortunately, that's the reality. I think it was easier for them to kind of respect my decisions. I think I also was informed, so which ironic. I think it's very ironic that they were ones who wanted the continuous monitoring with the CTG, but then the decisions weren't at all connected with that. So the
Mm.
CTG was completely fine, and they still wanted to do the oxytocin.
So we're like, so why do we have a CTG then? It's
Yeah,
for what? For what specifically,
and I
right?
think they
Yeah.
understood in the end, and they were like, "Oh, okay, yeah, we'll come back later." And then they didn't for like 6 hours, I think, wasn't it? The first time was 6 or 12 hours. I
So
remember.
what happens was that it was not progressing even though Maria had a epidural. We just thought, right, at least Maria is capable of tolerating the pain, but we wanted to naturally get it to progress. But it wasn't progressing. Only after a while was it started progressing. We negotiated the dose of the oxytocin that was given to us. So we started with a very low dose and then we
Mhm.
slowly increased that dose. And
I
I get
think we asked them to half it. We asked even less, but they said
Yes,
no.
so the midwife was still in touch with you and advise you on that
our
hospital journey.
our initial midwife wasn't allowed to be admitted in. So she handed over the information when we arrived and then she left. So the midwife
Yeah.
that received us was the one that
From the
took us through
hospital.
the journey within the
Yeah.
Hmm.
hospital. Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, oxytocin, we increased it
Then
once.
we started half. So it was about like 6 hours without anything, and then we started very low dose with like another with yeah half the dose that they usually give, and that was another 12 hours, and then still not much progress, and
Mhm.
then we went on to the regular dose, and that's when I think it was
Yeah.
very quick.
In a
It
couple of
was just
hours.
literally like in a couple of hours I was fully dilated.
Wow, so that happened really quick compared to the 5 days before, and how
Exactly.
did you feel? Because you had a partially working epidural. Did you feel the contractions? Did they feel different?
No, so the second procedure was I can't remember the name correctly, but it's a different. It's a
It was a
kind of
cross.
an epidural, but it affects differently. And so sometimes I was even a bit scared because I couldn't feel my legs, or
Mhm.
I could still feel the contractions, like the belly contracting. I couldn't feel pain, but sometimes I would because it would fade quite quickly. When it starts fading, it just goes completely. And then sometimes it would work on one side and not the other. I felt that at the hospital, it was much, much harder to
Yeah.
manage the contractions without the epidural. I just didn't feel like I had all the support I needed and the environment that I needed and that I had at home to manage that. And for me, water really helped at home.
And
Yeah.
that's something that doesn't exist yet in Portugal. So unfortunately, water birth is not an option when you go to the hospital. There is private or public. And so when it was time to push, tell us about that. Like how did you feel?
It was a beautiful moment. I think 2 weeks prior to birth, we had a consultation with our midwife, and there was another midwife there doing an internship and to learn about home births. And she was at the hospital then, and she was the one who received us. And that was so, so beautiful, and we felt so lucky to have her there, from, having this knowledge of, caring for the environment, caring for us too, caring for Carlos, for me, for how we were feeling.
And also a
And
familiar face, I can imagine.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it
cool.
was beautiful.
So you mentioned already that you dilated in a few hours, like to fully dilation. So how was that? Finally, you were like fully dilated.
Yeah, and we were ready for birth, and we were super
Yeah.
excited when that happened. It was early morning, so I think it was around like 7 a.m. when we were starting to give birth, I guess. And
Yes.
we were lucky because at that point we had the midwife only with us in the room. Lights were low lit, music was on. We had a playlist for Matthias's birth, and
And we were
funny
lucky.
enough, because the midwife that was giving birth with us in the room, it was only us three. She is also a doula, and she knew every single song of that playlist. So she was
Singing.
singing,
It's one big birth party in the room.
and it was incredible, right? It was super fast. It lasted maybe what, like
For you, it was. For me, it
35
wasn't.
minutes, 40 minutes.
For me, it felt like hours. Also, we were lucky that the main like surgical light that it's quite intense wasn't working,
Mm.
so it was like almost. It was really really dark in the room,
Mhm.
and yeah, it was half an hour. It was hard, that part, but it was yeah, it was so worth it.
We had a beautiful experience. We had the birth we wanted, even though it
Yeah.
wasn't at
The
our
one we
home.
asked.
And we had the conditions that we wanted, right? The values that we wanted were present. And we also had space to connect just after birth, right? So they left us in the room, just us three with Matthias, um,
Yeah, straight
straight
away.
away for about at least an hour
He was
before.
on like I grabbed him straight away and put him on my chest. We had skin to skin. He breastfed straight away.
Mm. Yeah.
They didn't
Beautiful.
even weight him. They didn't clean
They
him.
did
They
no,
did
like,
nothing. Like it
nothing
was.
for at least
So they
first.
respected your birth plan really,
They did. They did. Yeah.
which is amazing because that is something that is not so common. We hear a lot of birth stories where everything is a bit fresh when the baby is born, and we do know how important skin to skin is. So it's amazing that you had access to that, and I think it's important for everyone to know that you can ask for it and
Yes.
so like secure this little bubble after birth.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely,
Exactly.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it was plan B, but it worked out really well, and we were
Yeah.
really happy with the
Yeah.
And
outcomes.
then Matthias was there, your son.
Yeah. Our beautiful, perfect baby. Mm-hmm.
Super healthy, born at 42 weeks and like 2 days,
Wow.
super ready to come out of this world. He took his time,
Yeah.
but he came out super strong, yeah, and super healthy. We were super,
Yeah, it
super
was such
excited.
a beautiful moment, and it wasn't the birth we asked for, but it was definitely the birth we needed. And I truly believe in that. It was part of our process and our learnings, and yeah, and I'm very grateful for.
And in the perspective or of a maybe second child, are there things that you will do differently?
Yes, definitely.
I think expectations will be different already, right?
Yeah, that's in
Okay,
here.
yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
given. But I
Yeah.
think for me, it's definitely around limits, and I've learned so much about understanding my limits, respecting my limits, listening to my body, also trusting my body more and have confidence in, trusting the baby, trusting the process. It's hard sometimes not to hear the other voices, and there's so much that comes and that affects your confidence and your unconscious mind, and these things that keep feeding it, your unconscious mind, and then it affects the laboring process, because at the end of the day, I think the body doesn't lie, and the body is really giving you all the signs of everything that's within, and every labor is different, and trusting that's a journey.
Nice.
And what would you say is the number one role of the partner during that birth journey? And what would you recommend to all the partners that are listening?
Doesn't have to do with being a man or a woman. It has to do with the energy, and the female energy is very present and it's very needed. And I think if men can tap into that and be in tune with what the woman is really feeling, they could then help them by just, sometimes it's not fixing, because you can't fix. You can't,
Yeah.
fix
It's
the tennis
shifting, I guess,
is
for men, it's shifting the mentality of the do to the be.
Yeah.
exactly. It's exactly
Wow.
that.
I love
Well
that.
said. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's
And it's
the
really hard, I guess, for men when they're stressed or when they're going through uncertainty to be on the present moment
Yeah.
instead of thinking of what they need to do to solve or to provide. And that shift is hard. Um, so it's important to just have consciousness about it maybe beforehand, And I think just answering your question going into the next journey,
and you can practice,
that's
right?
definitely something we would be better aligned, I guess.
Men, and not just men, but partners in general, they can practice that throughout pregnancy
Yeah.
and ensure they're there, and they're in tune with what the woman needs.
Yeah, it's very inspiring, guys, how you did that, and thanks so much for sharing your story with us. It's been a
Thank
ride.
you.
And I think it is so very beautiful to know that it's okay if plan A doesn't work, and you can still have a plan B that
Yeah,
is beautiful and
definitely.
respectful and with an experience that stay in your heart. So we are really glad to hear that. Thank you so much for sharing it with all your honesty, and we were with you during these 5 days. Like I felt the
Yeah.
pain. Thank you so much, Maria and Carlos.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. Really. Thank you so much. And for everyone listening at home, I hope this also gives you some inspiration and some comfort and confidence that this is that everyone has their own journey. But if you trust in yourself and you trust on the decisions you make, things will prevail and you'll always have a good experience, right? If you believe in it. So please continue doing so.
That's a brilliant conclusion. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thanks for listening to Born to Be Wild, the podcast. If you want to continue the conversation, you can find us on Instagram at borntobewild.pt and Birth Mode. We would love to hear from you.
All sources and references mentioned in this episode are in the show notes below. And if you enjoy this episode, of course, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. It's really the best way to help us grow. See you next time!